They called him the King of Kings, the man who bent oceans to his will and burned cities until their gods turned to ash. But those who saw Xerxes at the end of his reign whispered something else, that the mightiest king in the world was haunted by the ghosts of his own palace. The harem of Persepolis was not a place of silk and pleasure, as the poets claimed. It was a temple of control. The most beautiful women from across the empire gathered in gilded halls, not as wives or concubines, but as ornaments of victory. Every face reminded Xerxes of a conquest. Babylonian dancers, Egyptian priestesses, daughters of noble houses from Lydia to Bactria, each taken as proof that the world itself was his servant. But victory breeds emptiness, and in the stillness of the palace that emptiness grew like rot. They said that after his failed campaign against Greece, Xerxes changed. The man who had once stood before 1,000 soldiers now refused to stand before a mirror. He began to fear what he could not conquer, the god's silence. His mother, Atossa, warned him that the Persians once believed kings ruled only by divine favor. When the gods turned their faces away, even empires of gold would fall to dust. So Xerxes turned his harem into a sanctuary of mirrors, a hidden palace within the palace. No man was allowed inside. The women there were not chosen for their beauty alone, but for something else. Each was said to represent a star, a symbol, an omen. The king began to believe that their reflections could show him the will of the divine. Every night, he would walk through the perfumed corridors, burning incense thick as fog. The women were forbidden to speak unless spoken to. They sat motionless like living statues. But when the moon reached its highest point, Xerxes would command them to rise, and together they would chant the names of forgotten gods, older than Ahura Mazda, older than Persia itself. The ritual began as a way to seek visions. It became an obsession. When, one night, a Babylonian girl called Tamaris with eyes black as obsidian was said to have spoken during the ritual. She asked the king, "Why do you beg the gods for their favor when you've already burned their temples?" The question was blasphemy, but Xerxes did not have her killed. He had her painted in gold alive until she suffocated. And then he placed her statue at the center of the harem hall, a reminder to the others of what awaited disobedience. From that night on, the women began to call themselves the daughters of the golden curse. And yet something began to shift. Servants swore that whispers echoed through the corridors long after the king had left, whispers that spoke in voices not of the living. The mirrors began to fog over without smoke or heat, and the most beautiful of all the women, a Median noble named Artane, was seen weeping blood in her sleep. When she awoke, she said she had dreamed of Xerxes crowned in shadows, surrounded by the corpses of his daughters, each one holding a mirror reflecting only darkness. Still, the king refused to end the rituals. He demanded more incense, more blood offerings, more nights without dawn. He said the gods were close, that he could feel their eyes upon him. And perhaps they were, because one by one the women began to vanish. At first it was explained away, a dancer sent to another palace, a concubine taken ill. But by the 7th disappearance, even the guards grew uneasy. They said the air itself grew heavy near the harem's sealed gates. They said that sometimes at midnight, the sound of soft singing came from within, though no one had entered. When the chief eunuch dared to question Xerxes, the king smiled and said, "They are not gone, they have ascended. I have shown them eternity." The next morning, the eunuch was found hanging from the garden trees, his eyes replaced with polished onyx stones. The court began to whisper that Xerxes had found a way to make the women immortal, but at a price. They said he had bound their souls to the mirrors, trapping them between life and death. Those mirrors were said to glow faintly, even in darkness, and if you stared long enough, you could see shapes moving. Faces, perhaps, or hands pressed against the glass. Artane, the last of the harem's chosen, began to lose her voice. She stopped speaking altogether, until the only sound she made was the faintest hum, like the low resonance of metal. The servants feared her eyes most of all, wide, unblinking, and gleaming like polished silver. When Xerxes asked her why she no longer prayed, she simply smiled and said, "The gods you call have already answered, my king." That night, the mirrors shattered, all of them. The sound shook the palace like thunder. When the guards burst into the harem, they found the women gone, everyone. Only their silken robes remained, draped over empty couches. The air smelled of myrrh and burnt honey. And in the center of the hall stood Xerxes alone, his skin covered in cuts, his eyes fixed on the gold statue of Tamaris. He whispered over and over again, "They've seen the truth and they cannot return." After that, no one was permitted near the harem. The gates were sealed with bronze, the keys buried beneath the king's chambers. But the servants swore that at night they could still hear the sound of faint laughter drifting through the cracks. Laughter that was neither cruel nor joyful, but something beyond human understanding. Years later, when Xerxes was assassinated in his own bed, his murderer, one of his generals, was found kneeling by the sealed doors, weeping uncontrollably. When asked why, he said, "I saw them in the mirrors. They were calling his name." And when the tomb of Xerxes was opened centuries later, the archaeologists found fragments of mirror glass among the royal jewels, each shard polished to perfection, yet reflecting only blackness. They said Xerxes never slept again after the night of the mirrors. The halls of Persepolis still shimmered with gold, but the light had changed, colder, sharper, like sunlight filtered through tears. Servants whispered that the king's chambers had no curtains anymore, no shadows at all, because he feared what waited in them. When he looked into water, he saw faces that weren't his. When he looked into flame, it blinked back. The empire still bowed before him, Babylon, Lydia, Egypt, and the burning coasts of Greece. But in the silence between wars, his empire began to rot. The gardens wilted. The eunuchs spoke in riddles. The marble floors of his palace began to sweat salt, as if the sea was trying to reclaim him. The priests of Ahura Mazda came to purify the palace. They brought incense, hymns, and sacrificial fire. But when they reached the king's door, a wind blew through the temple halls and extinguished every flame. One priest, the youngest, swore he saw movement behind the door. A woman's silhouette, her head tilted, her hair long and black as obsidian. He fled that night barefoot and was never seen again. They said Xerxes had begun speaking to the mirrors. No one dared to enter his chamber uninvited. Those who did were found days later, standing still, unblinking, their pupils turned to silver, as if they had seen the sun too closely. And yet there were whispers, whispers that the mirrors spoke back. Years passed. Empires shifted. Xerxes grew thin, ghostly, like parchment stretched over rage. He summoned the Magi, men who had seen eclipses and comets and read the tongues of fire. They brought him prophecies written on bone and silk. They told him that what he had done could not be undone. The eyes he had taken, the daughters he had broken, the mirror he had kissed, all were bound now in the reflection of his own soul. For every daughter silenced, they warned, a generation will lose its name. Xerxes laughed, a sound that cracked like glass. The last night of the empire came quietly. A sandstorm had swallowed the horizon. The torches along the palace walls burned blue. Inside, Xerxes stood before the great mirror, the same that had once hung above the Harem-S pool. It was said that mirror was made from the polished backs of 12 beaten shields, trophies from the Greek campaign. But tonight, it was not bronze that gleamed. It was flesh, moving, breathing. In its surface, he saw them, his daughters, their faces pale and perfect, their eyes empty but watching. They smiled. "Father," one of them whispered, though her mouth did not move. "Do you remember our names?" He tried, but the sound that came from his lips was not language. It was a cry. Another spoke. "You promised eternity. You gave us silence." And the mirror trembled. He reached out, his hand shaking. "I gave you beauty. I gave you..." But the words turned to dust. The glass rippled. From within it, pale hands began to emerge, dozens of them, pressing outward, soft as silk at first, then harder, cracking the surface like ice. The first hand to break through was gold, its fingers tipped with obsidian nails. It touched his face. He screamed. Every reflection in the palace, every mirror, every polished cup, every drop of water began to shimmer. The air filled with the echo of laughter. The daughters came through the glass, one by one, not as flesh, but as reflections given life. Their bodies glowed faintly, their faces neither alive nor dead. They surrounded him in silence. Xerxes stumbled backward. "No, no, I am your king." One of them tilted her head. Her voice was soft. "No, you are our sin." And then the mirrors shattered. The servants heard it, 1,000 panes breaking at once, like thunder from every wall. They rushed into the chamber, but the king was gone. All that remained was a smear of blood across the floor, and a single golden shard still warm to the touch. When they looked into it, they saw his eyes staring back, alive, terrified, unblinking. In the years that followed, Persia began to fall. Armies rebelled, cities burned. They said a plague swept through the women of the court. Every daughter of noble blood was born with no reflection. They covered the mirrors. They prayed to gods older than Zoroaster. But every time the sun set, the glass would fog, and in that fog would appear the faint outline of a hand. They called it the curse of the king's daughters. Some said it was vengeance, others said it was justice. But in the archives of Babylon, there are tablets that tell another tale. That one night, beneath the ruins of Persepolis, a figure walked among the ashes, a woman in gold, her eyes glowing like sunlight through honey, and wherever she walked, the shadows followed. Centuries passed, the empire crumbled, the names faded into legend, but the mirrors remained. Scholars claim that a fragment of Xerxes' mirror still exists, hidden in a vault beneath the ruins of Naksh-e-Rustam. Travelers who have seen it speak of strange dreams, visions of a woman standing behind them, whispering names they do not know. Some dream of a palace on fire. Some wake up with tears of gold on their cheeks. And one record, found in the journal of a 19th century archaeologist, describes what might have been the last trace of the curse. At dusk, I looked upon the fragment. For a moment, my reflection smiled before I did. And then behind me I saw him, a man with eyes of silver, whispering that he had traded kingdoms for a single touch. The archaeologist vanished that night. Only his journal remained. The last line read, "The daughters remember." Even now, in the deserts of modern Iran, there are villages that refuse to keep mirrors indoors. Mothers cover the windows with cloth when their daughters come of age. They say the king still looks for heirs, and the daughters still look for names. And sometimes, on the hottest nights when the moon burns red, travelers see a woman standing in the sand, holding a shard of gold against her chest, whispering to her reflection, "Father, can you see me now?"